On this Sunday night, a border-crossing wildfire threatens a BC town. The evacuation orders and alerts around Osoyoos.
The whole hill looked like it was on fire, all behind us.
As BC's southern interior becomes the province's wildfire hotspot. Grocery store staff on strike.
The economy cannot sustain itself when the people who are earning the paychecks can't afford to live.
Thousands of Metro workers walk off the job in the latest in a wave of labor action across Canada. Why Ukraine's president is warning the war is returning to Russia after a drone attack closes a Moscow airport. And Canada versus Australia, a Women's World Cup preview and predictions.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. First tonight to Canada's erupting wildfire emergency. Hundreds of people in a BC town have been forced from their homes after a fast-growing wildfire jumped the Canada-U.S. border.
This is looking down towards the border.
The eerie glow seen on the hillside last night sounding the alarm for locals. In a matter of hours, the Eagle Bluff wildfire exploded in size. The fire front is just 4 kilometers from the nearest homes. The entire town of Osoyoos, a popular holiday hotspot, is on edge and under an evacuation alert. Despite the wildfire deemed out of control, it seems to have slowed. But the situation shows just how quickly everything can change. Mike Drolet has our top story tonight.
For the moment, at least, the town of Osoyoos, BC, is breathing a sigh of relief. The town, 400 kilometers east of Vancouver on the U.S. border, declared a state of emergency late Saturday, when over 700 homes were evacuated and another 2,000 were put on alert.
It was a little restless. We spent the night sleeping in our car, or attempting to sleep in our car.
But with the fire right on the edge of town, it's looking like another sleepless night.
Definitely through like that peak burning window later into the afternoon where we see our highest temperatures and our lowest relative humidity is where we're going to watch for that increase in fire activity.
U.S. satellites caught the moment the fire started around 2 p.m. Saturday near Oroville in Washington state. Water bombers could be seen refilling their tanks in the lake and attacking the blaze. And as late as 6 p.m., U.S. authorities believed it had only a moderate risk of growth. But the fire, now called Eagle Bluff, spread quickly, moving north across the border towards the town of 5,000. By 9 p.m., it was deemed out of control, and the residents of Osoyoos were put on notice. Joanne Smith didn't need to be told to leave.
I could see the fire coming down the hill from my back window. Better to be alive than to be in your house and in ashes.
Over 3,000 hectares are burning on the U.S. side of the border, nearly 900 in BC, small compared to the blazes in the north of the province. BC's overworked fire services would like to keep it that way, provided they can contain its spread. Mike Drolet, Global News.
As the planet's hottest month on record comes to a close, dangerous temperatures are still bearing down on parts of the U.S. Close to 70 million Americans are under heat alerts. And as Jamie Mauracher explains, while there is relief in the forecast for some, a reprieve of the unrelenting summer scorcher won't come for everyone.
Another weekend of excessive heat for millions of Americans.
It's miserable. I mean, I work outside, so it's even worse.
Heat advisories are widespread across more than 10 states from Texas to Florida. Phoenix, Arizona has been smashing records all month and topped 43 degrees for the 30th day in a row. There is hope monsoon rains could bring a wave of relief, especially at night. A much-needed break from heat so extreme, even cacti have been struggling to survive.
We talk about drought and we all make a big deal of the drought that we're in, but it's more than that. It's much warmer.
This month's mean global temperature is projected to be at least 0.2 degrees warmer than July of 2019, the former hottest month in 174 years of observational data.
Our analysis does actually show already that July 2023 is going to be the warmest month on record. Not only the warmest July, but the warmest month on the record.
Although this month is typically the warmest worldwide, experts say human-driven climate change and a predominant El Nino year are pushing the mercury higher. Late this week, heat and humidity hit the East Coast, too. Washington, Philadelphia, and New York City hovered around 40 degrees. And while those regions are returning to normal, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi are heading into another heat wave.
And even those places that are used to extreme heat have never seen it as hot as it is now for as long as it's been.
Millions starting off the last full month of summer, hoping for an end to the dangerous highs. Jamie Mauracher, Global News, Houston.
In Alberta, investigators are looking into a deadly plane crash in Kananaskis Country that killed all 6 people on board. The small aircraft was traveling from Calgary to Salmon Arm, BC on Friday night when it went down just a few kilometers north of Kananaskis Village. As Heather Yourex-West explains, poor visibility may be partly to blame for the tragedy.
At the base of Mount McGillivray in Kananaskis, Alberta, investigators are trying to determine exactly what went wrong. What caused a Piper PA-32 aircraft like this one to slam violently into the Rocky Mountains 30 minutes into its journey from Calgary to Salmon Arm, BC?
The aircraft, which departed the Springbank Airport at around 9 p.m., had 1 pilot and 5 passengers on board.
Recovery crews assisted by members of Canada's military and Alberta Parks Mountain Rescue were able to locate the crash site by homing a signal coming from an emergency locator transmitter. By early Saturday morning, officials knew nobody on board the plane had survived.
We had a bit of cloud. Thankfully, the crew working with the military did an amazing job being able to spot the recovery and hone in on the ELT. And then working with them closely, we were able to get onto site fairly quickly.
The bodies of the victims and several large pieces of the aircraft were removed from the mountain site on Saturday, but investigators say many smaller pieces of the plane remain. Officials say based on the scene, it appeared to have been a violent crash.
The word violent crash to me means that it was at cruising speed and that it hit the ground or flew into the ground. It could be a very steep crash site, so it could be like a head-on collision into terrain.
The victims, all from the Calgary area, had been traveling to Salmon Arm to attend a church gathering. Their friends and family now leaning on their faith as they come to grips with so much devastating loss. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Kananaskis, Alberta.
In BC, 2 children who were the subject of a 10-day-long Amber Alert have been found safe. Their mother and her boyfriend are now facing abduction charges. Police say the 2 children were found last night at a rural property near Edson, Alberta, about 2 hours west of Edmonton. Global News is not identifying the suspects to protect the privacy of the children. About 3,700 Metro workers are on the picket lines for a second day as 27 grocery stores in the Greater Toronto area remain closed. Employees previously rejected a tentative contract agreement reached earlier this month. As Amar Khan explains, some staff say the cost of living is so high they can't even afford the food they're selling in their own stores.
We want a livable wage. Toronto is an extremely expensive city. So many of our members, unfortunately, have to use food banks. We have several that live in community housing.
As the sun beats down on unionized striking Metro workers, the group remains steadfast, with many members already struggling as the company nets record profits. Some Metro employees say they can't afford to shop at their own store and talk about trying to find deals at cheaper grocery outlets.
We have to do flyer hopping, see who has what on sale, and instead of going for one grocery shopping a week, we're going for 3 or 4 because we have to go to multiple locations.
You want to pick up some groceries at your own grocery store, but with the skyrocketed prices, you can't even afford to do that.
Vitek has been working at Metro for 5 years, but to make ends meet, she works a second job.
There is no social life. I just go to work and I come home and I try to race to my other job.
Okay. Residents in Liberty Village who are being affected by the strike say they're backing workers' rights.
They got to do what they got to do, so I'm totally okay with that, and I can just rearrange my day.
Before the strike, the bargaining committee voted to accept a deal from Metro, but members voted it down. When Metro officials were asked if the contract included a living wage, they said yes.
I believe it did.
The union, though, says that's not true. According to a recent report from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, Representatives, the average one-bedroom Toronto wage to live is over $33 an hour. And according to the union, full-time workers at Metro average just over $22 an hour, while part-time employees, which make up the majority of Metro workers, make just a shade over the $15.75 minimum wage. As for the fight, the union says they're in it for the long haul.
This is a fight that we're going to take, and we're going to help grocery workers everywhere in Canada.
This labor dispute is more widespread than just one grocery chain. Contract negotiations are coming up for Loblaw's owned Dominion in Newfoundland, as well as No Frills in Ontario. Sobeys workers will also be negotiating, while Metro's other owned and operated Ontario stores, Food Basics, will be at the negotiation tables in November. Amar Khan, Global News, Toronto.
Ukraine reports bringing the war deep into Russia. Coming up, the response after an overnight drone attack on Moscow. A powerful bomb has ripped through a political rally in Pakistan, killing at least 44 people. Supporters of a hardline conservative party were demonstrating in the country's northwest near the border with Afghanistan. There's no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack. In Ukraine today, the country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, says the war is returning to Russia. Overnight, the Kremlin says it intercepted 3 more Ukrainian drones over the skies of Moscow. Meanwhile, Russian leader Vladimir Putin claims he never rejected peace talks to end the invasion of Ukraine, an invasion he started almost a year and a half ago. Redmond Shannon reports.
An explosion in Moscow's financial district. The Kremlin blames Ukrainian drones. As usual, Ukraine is not explicitly taking responsibility for attacks inside Russia. But after visiting injured troops Sunday, President Volodymyr Zelensky hinted at it. He said that war is gradually returning to the territory of Russia, calling it an inevitable, natural and absolutely fair process. The apparent attack on Moscow came on the symbolic Navy Day in Russia. Vladimir Putin at Navy headquarters in St. Petersburg. The Russian leader announcing 30 new ships for the fleet. He was joined by some of the African leaders who were in Russia for a summit with Putin. This weekend, he said Russia remains open to peace plans put forward by African countries and China, but says Russia can't step back while it's attacked by Ukraine, attacked in a war that Russia started.
He does this all the time. He puts the onus of peace on others, in this case, Ukraine.
The terms of such talks are far from anything Zelensky is prepared to consider.
Ukrainians in this moment cannot accept anything less than getting back to their borders of 1991.
The prospect for any ceasefire also seems unlikely in the light of Russia raising the maximum conscription age from 27 to 30, and Putin's assertion that the end of the Black Sea grain deal will economically benefit Russia. The chaos and bloodshed inside Ukraine continues, with deadly shelling in the northeastern city of Sumy. And in Kyiv, another sign of the widening chasm between the warring nations. Workers removing Soviet symbols from one of Europe's tallest statues, the 100-metre-high Motherland Monument. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Political unrest ahead, the tension and turmoil in Niger after a military-backed coup. The French embassy in Niger attacked by protesters as thousands marched through the capital of the former French colony. All of them in support of the military-backed coup that ousted the West African country's president last week. President Mohamed Bazoum was detained by his own presidential guard, accusing him of poor governance and deteriorating national security. He's considered a key ally of the West in Africa. A military junta led by General Abdourahmane Tiani has now taken over the country. The EU already announced it's cut off financial support to Niger, while several West African nations have also suspended ties with it as international allies demand for the immediate reinstatement of President Bazoum. As Crystal Gamansing reports, the takeover has raised more worries for a region that's fallen into deeper instability over the last few years.
Hopes for stability and prosperity are disappearing in Niger, a landlocked nation in a region where extremist groups such as Boko Haram, the Al-Qaeda affiliate known as JNIM, and the Islamic State of Greater Sahara operate.
There was a lot of hope and assumptions that Niger would remain this bulwark of stability in the region.
Niger is one of the poorest nations in the world. It's also where millions have fled to escape conflicts elsewhere on the continent. After the military took the president hostage, a national broadcast took place Friday announcing the constitution had been suspended. Identified as the new leader, the head of the Presidential Guard cited the country's deteriorating security situation as well as poor economic and social governance for the coup. There have been 7 coups in West and Central Africa since 2020. Mali and Burkina Faso were the latest. In fact, there were 2 in Burkina Faso just last year. The Russian-based Wagner Group is active in both countries. At the recent Russia-African summit, the leaders from both countries attended and praised Russian leadership and support. Our African heads of state must stop acting like puppets who dance every time the imperialists pull the strings, said the self-proclaimed head of Burkina Faso's interim government. Niger is a Western ally in combating Islamic extremism in the region, and many countries use it as a base in support of counterterrorism efforts. More than 1,000 French troops are positioned there. The U.S., Italy, and the European Union bloc also have a presence in the country, as does Canada, under Operation Nibirius, a training mission aimed at bolstering local military and security forces. In a statement to Global News after the president was deposed, the Department of National Defense said there is a limited number of CAF members present in support of planning and liaison for future training serials. There are no plans to evacuate at this time. We are monitoring the situation closely.
With Niger collapsing, we're looking at an entire belt across the African continent of countries that are experiencing tumultuous instability at the moment.
The Russian president offered security support to all African leaders who attended his 2-day summit, possibly increasing Wagner's reach and stoking tensions with the West. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Next, a look ahead at Canada's crucial match against Australia in the Women's World Cup. The clock is ticking down to Canada's biggest game so far at the Women's World Cup. They'll face the co-host Australians on Monday in what is essentially a do-or-die match. Joining us now from Sydney is Adam Peacock, host of 7 Sport. Adam, thanks so much for being here.
No problem.
So I'm sure you and I are both rooting for opposing teams in this game, but can you set up what's at stake here for Australia and Canada?
Everything, pretty much. Sorry to heighten what it all means, but it pretty much has reached the peak of what you aim for in football, and that's at a World Cup and then performing and getting to the knockout stages. And from an Australian perspective, it hasn't gone all that well so far. We've had a loss the other night to Nigeria, which is a huge surprise, and we've been without our best player in Sam Kerr, who's declared her availability for this match, but we need her the way we're playing at the moment.
Before this tournament, some groups had labeled Group B the so-called Group of Death. Can you remind us what that means, and were those predictions right?
There's always a group of death at a World Cup. Like, people just love giving that label to one group, which looks tougher than all of the others. Look, this is a very difficult group. You've got the host Australia, who are in great form going in. You've got Canada, of course. You guys know that they won the Olympic gold in Tokyo. Nigeria, 11-time African champions, ranked 40 in the world, but much better than that because they don't play against top-class opposition all that often. And Ireland, a European team who are very hard to break down. So it was a difficult group. Sometimes these groups at a World Cup, you get one game which stands out and you go, okay, we can definitely say we're going to get through that one, but not Group B at this World Cup.
You mentioned from an Australian perspective, it sounds like things haven't been going as well. Just generally, what's your assessment of how the tournament is going so far? The games are quite spread out with venues across 2 countries, multiple cities. Does it feel like fans are getting into it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it surprised a lot of people here. Like in Australia, there's a lot of sporting content for people to feast their eyes on. We've got our footy codes, as we call them, like AFL and rugby league. I won't go into it. It'll just confuse all your viewers. But we've got those big things going on right now. We've got cricket happening. But this has captured people's imagination because it's something different. Like a couple of nights ago in Brisbane, we had 50,000 people watching Brazil and France. I was at a game in Sydney not that long ago, 30,000 people watching Colombia and Korea. Yeah, it's captured people's imagination, definitely.
All right, before we let you go, without playing favorites, which team do you think wins tomorrow and why?
Well, there's a big difference between which team I think will win and which team I hope will win. Obviously, all the hope is with Australia. It's going to be tight. I can honestly see it coming down to one big moment. Hopefully it falls Australia's way. But Canada really loved their second half against Ireland, the way Bev Priestman changed the tactics, changed the personnel. So in my opinion, they're actually favourites based on that going in. So I wouldn't be surprised if Canada win, but be very, very happy if Australia did.
Well said. All right, that is 7 Sport host Adam Peacock. Adam, thank you very much.
No problem.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is Emerald Lake near Field, British Columbia. We love seeing your Canada. Please keep emailing your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks so much for watching. Donna will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.